Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new remastered top 10 video here on the channel, one where we're combining two lists together in a singular video because we're talking not only about the worst Skylanders but also the best ones. Now let it be noted that the title is no liar, we are basing this list purely on the 3DS characters, so naturally how good the Skylanders are on the console version aren't really taken into account unless there's a big disparity between what the console Skylanders like and what the 3DS Skylanders like, because obviously 3DS Skylanders that don't live up to their console counterparts are very disappointing, leaving an overall negative spin on their 3DS counterpart. So yes, now that I've got that out of the way, if a character you like is ranked low on the list, it might be that they are awesome in console versions, but absolutely terrible in 3DS versions, and vice versa, which is why we're doing a best and worst list for comparison's sake. Now bearing in mind that for the 3DS versions we're only going to be counting from Spyro's Adventure through Trap Team, because from there onwards Superchargers was a racing orientated game where the character you chose didn't really affect the gameplay all too much, so therefore I can't really justify Superchargers being on this list, and the Imaginators didn't even get a 3DS counterpart. So yeah, that's pretty much everything to note about this. We are going to kick things off with the worst list because I want to end this premiere on a high note, on a positive note, which is going to be done with the best list, mind you. And one final note is that designs are taken into account for this here list, mind you, of these lists I should say, so how good for Skylanders designers as well as how good they are purely in the 3DS version. Those are the two main things taken into account when creating these lists, and this hasn't been a video completely made from scratch. Like I said, this is a remastered video from the channel's past, so I've kept the same list I had when I made that original video. I've even kept most of the reasoning and commentary the same, but it is remastered, so I have much better audio and visual quality. Clearly enough of all this has been said and done, so let's roll the intro without further ado. For number 10, I have Flipwreck, who I thought was going to be incredibly epic in this game because of the console games, where I might think he's a tad overrated, but I still enjoy him to a certain extent in that version. I even summoned him early into my gameplay series thinking that he would be, as I said earlier, incredibly epic, but it turns out I was wrong in thinking this, because Flipwreck on the 3DS version actually sucks. He's incredibly slow and way too weak for how slow he is, and overall his moveset is very generic and feels rather uninspired, and so overall I feel like this character had a huge downgrade, and he's just not a great character altogether, no matter whether you take into account how much he's been downgraded or not. In other words, as a standalone character purely from the 3DS version, I really do not like this guy. At number 9, I have Slobbertooth, who is a character I completely forgot to use in my Trap Team playthrough for the 3DS, and that's because of the bad memories I had from playing him in Swap Force for 3DS. This guy is incredibly slow, and his attacks are incredibly weak and do not compensate for it, just like Flipwreck. Also, his design is quite ugly, and it's nothing more than a mismatch of Tornado and Bash, making it feel bland and unoriginal. So overall, I feel like this guy's moveset and design is the most uninspired of the whole of the cast from this here list. That's why I think Slobbertooth is terrible from 3DS, and therefore worthy of a number 9 worst slot on the list. For number 8, I have Fright Rider, and it really hurts me to put him on this list because of how awesome his design is, but when I played him first on Skylanders Giants 3DS, I realised how much missed potential he had. With this character, his attacks are slow, but they have a very wide range, so basically you can hit enemies from a bunch of different angles, which you would think is a good thing, but that also means he leaves his personal hitbox open for longer, So this allows him to get attacked very easily by enemies, and it's very hard for him to dodge attacks. His slowness doesn't help him either, which is unexpected from a character such as this. So I wound up very disappointed by the 3DS version of Fright Rider, as it takes everything great about the console versions, does the complete opposite, and they wonder why he turned out so terrible. For number 7, I have Blastmind, who I only used once in Trap Team 3DS, because after I used him once I didn't want to use him ever again. His attacks were incredibly lame. You'd think for a character who looks this way he'd have some really awesome attacks, but per the theme of this list, you would be thinking wrong. His attacks, for a start, in comparison to the console version, are incredibly downgraded, just like Flip Break, due to the 3DS limitations, so Blastmind couldn't be given the same attacks as the console counterpart, and what we got for his attacks instead was something incredibly lame, and it actually affects the pacing of the game because it's such a slow-paced moveset style. I do not have fun playing as this guy because of how lame his attacks are, and it's such a shame that his design truly went to waste in the 3DS version. For number 6, I have an incredibly unexpected character because this is Drobot. In his 3DS version, the lasers are incredibly nerfed as they're both weak and slow. Unlike the console version of this character, they don't warrant you using this guy. He leaves his saw blades as the only redeeming part of his moveset because they are actually fairly powerful and fairly quick, but as for his eye lasers, which I previously mentioned, sure, they are faster than most other projectiles in the game, but they still shouldn't deal as little damage as they do, leading to a character who can't deal enough damage to enemies in a quick enough amount of time, making him an incredibly lame speedrunner, an incredibly lame platformer, and an incredibly lame character overall. Such a shame given how much I like the design. It's so badass to see an amalgamation of a dragon and a robot. Such a letdown that this incredible design with a fine attention to detail received such a crappy moveset, at least for the 3DS version. Anyway, for number 5 on the worst list, I have Eruptor, whose attacks are incredibly slow and weak. Those two things do not mix well together, and not to mention his eruption has such a small area of effect that it's not even worth using, and his lava lobs have such poor range also that they're not worth using for the exact same reason. This makes his moveset incredibly useless and uninspired. I would generally avoid using this guy when playing through these games, making him a very appropriate number 5 slot for the worst list right here. For number 4, I have yet another huge surprise because we're talking about Pop Fizz. Before you hit the dislike button, I know already that you're thinking, what's such an awesome character doing all the way down here? Well, let me answer that question with my own question. What makes Pop Fizz awesome is the fact that he turns into a beast and starts ravaging his enemies. To me, that certainly is the reason why, and that's exactly what's lacking in the 3DS version of this character. On the 3DS, he can lob potions and swap between those potions, and that is it. Plus, those potions in and of themselves are incredibly downgraded, I'm afraid, meaning that they are quite lame, very weak, and slow-paced. It's an absolute drag to play as him, and his attacks aren't anywhere as strong as they need to be for him to be classed as anything other than decent. Receiving our bronze medal on the worst list is Trailblazer. His design I'm not the largest fan of, he doesn't stand out, plus we've seen fire creatures decked out in armor before, so neither is all that original. This laziness is also evident in his moveset because his hitbox is fairly large, allowing him to get defeated quite easily, and because of the lack of range in his fireball attacks, it makes him a very ineffective character that isn't much fun to play as because, like I said, his moveset is lame, generic, and very boring indeed. For number 2, I have Sprocket, and if I could describe this character in one word, it would be weak. Weak. You get my point. She's incredibly weak. Her attacks leave her open and are very slow as well as weak. Meaning she gets hit more than she hits her enemies, allowing for her to die incredibly easy, which is highly unfortunate. Her mind's completely slowed down her pacing. Having a slow, consistent pacing is one thing, but having a pace that is all over the place is much worse. Makes her messy, and this inconsistent pacing makes her so unfun to play as. That's why I feel like she must get the run-up slot on this worst list right here. For number 1, we have a character which no doubt we all saw come in because it's none other than Wrecking Ball, who's the only one appropriate for this slot on the worst list because Wrecking Ball is lame in every meaning of the word. He's a literal joke. The design is ugly and I hate it. Putting my bias against Wrecking Ball aside, I can tell you that his moveset is still incredibly lame. He has a tongue attack and a Wrecking Ball attack. Yes, his attacks are just that generic, that uninspired, and that boring. On top of that, he's also incredibly ineffective and the literal opposite of fun. If the moveset isn't fun, at the bare minimal it can at least be effective in combat, then that's still good at least, and the character therefore would be worth using, but Wrecking Ball is none of that. I don't have any sort of fun with this character whatsoever, and the character is so ineffective that it feels like I'm barely even damaging enemies at all. After all of that, how can I possibly have any praise for this character? I truly don't feel that there is anything worse in this entire franchise, which justifies him being number 1 on the worst list right here. So that pretty much does it for the worst list, and luckily for us that means the end of negativity into this video, because now we get to move on to the top 10 best Skylanders based solely on the 3DS versions. Without further ado, let's get into it. For my number 10 best, I have Blackout. This guy's design is awesome. Being half gargoyle and half dragon, there is no shortage of intimidation and creativity poured into the design work of this character, especially for his figurine. But not only is his design awesome, his moveset is awesome as well. The moveset itself covers a wide range, meaning that enemies in a wide range that are surrounding you can be hit in that wide area. And this guy actually has a really small hitbox, meaning that it's not so easy for enemies to hit him back, which obviously makes him way more effective than all of the characters previously mentioned in the worst list. It obviously helps that the attacks are very fast-paced, fluent, and very fun to use as cherry on top of the cake for this guy. For number 9, I have Bushwhack. Now this guy's attacks might be incredibly slow, but this time around the attacks are actually worth using, as the strikes are incredibly powerful. He has very powerful swings with that axe right there, and above all, his animations are very funny to watch, and it gives him so much personality, which is awesome to see because Skylander characters always need something to distinguish themselves from others, and when that can't be found in their moveset, that can at least be found in their personality, and Bushwhack's personality is one of the most distinctive and memorable for the entirety of the franchise. Above all, his moveset is effective, powerful, and fun to use. His animations are great alongside his personality, allowing for a character worthy of the number 9 slot on the best list right here. For number 8, I have Deja Vu, a character that I was very surprised by. After not expecting much, she came through to really surprise me. At level 6, she was a beast already, which is incredibly impressive. Her attacks themselves were very fast-paced and very awesome to use as well. She's very fun because of how in-depth her moveset actually is, because she has multiple attacks which are all unique and distinctive from one another, making any chain of these attacks you use in combat different every time. This strategy keeps you invested in the game. There is even a great upgrade tree to take advantage of all the different attacks she can perform. It's surprising how a 3DS character of all things can have a moveset as distinctive and as complex as it is, plus other characters to shame, because if Deja Vu can do it, why can't characters like Blastermind also do it? Simply put, he is lame, whilst she certainly is not. Coming in at number 7 is Zulu. He's very effective in battle, as his birds can be summoned from a huge distance away and still be incredibly powerful. In fact, he's such an incredibly powerful ranged character, which is awesome to see, and it's unparalleled for the most part amongst other Skylanders. You know, you have a Drobot in the console version who's badass with his projectiles, and Zulu is the equivalent projectile-wise in the 3DS version. And this is not to mention that his moveset is incredibly unique, because what other characters can do don't remotely resemble what Zulu can do, as he can summon boars and summon birds. That helps make this character incredibly unique and memorable. His design is cherry on top of the cake because it's awesome. I love the cape and the staff of his with the great attention to detail that it has. As you can see the embodiments of the creatures he can summon embezzled upon it even. My apologies for stutter, but his personality is also great, and the moveset is not only really effective as previously mentioned, but it's a ton of fun to utilise as well. It's because of how well rounded this character is which drives him to become a huge favourite of mine. For number 6, I have my go-to giant giant, which is Bouncer for the 3DS version. This guy's attacks are very, very fun to use. His rockets and finger guns are very fast and effective, but not to mention his eye lasers create a very fun animation to watch, and it also is what makes him so incredibly quick. I'd highly recommend him for platforming and speedrunning in Giants for the 3DS. These aren't things I'd normally recommend for a Giant, but Bouncer is just leagues above the other 7 in just how good he is overall. For number 5, I have Voodoo, who's quite possibly the most powerful character on this list. His attacks are very, very fast and very, very powerful. Emphasis on the very. Those are two things you wouldn't normally see meshing together, and that's what makes them so much fun. You will plow through enemies, which makes it so much fun because you can laugh in their faces and be like, "Ha! I'm so much better than you." And that's really what we look for in these games. We look for a way to be absurdly destructive and annihilate everything on screen. Voodoo is basically the best character at accomplishing this, with a stellar design on top of it all. How can I say Voodoo is worth anything other than 5 on the best list right here? For number 4, I have Nightlight, who's a very fast-paced character indeed. I really enjoy utilising this guy because of just how fast-paced his attacks are, and yet at the same time they are still balanced and quite powerful. This guy has a large hitbox, which doesn't make him incredibly overpowered, because Skylanders that are overpowered can be quite boring occasionally, but Nightlight instead is very good at making both the game easier, but also more fun to go through at the same time. In other words, you need to earn his power. He's only going to be as effective as your play style with him is. It can be punishing when you act foolishly with him, but also rewarding when you play well. That balance makes him better than previous characters on this list in my personal opinion. His design really adds to it, and you can really see him shine quite literally because of the glitter and everything that adds an incredible attention to detail on the figurine itself. For number 3, I have Fistbump, who's easily the best core from Trap Team in the 3DS version. Now this guy, he has so many combos that he can string together, which makes him even more powerful and effective. Not to mention, stringing these combos together can be extremely fun and rewarding for you to learn his moveset and his attacks, and from there they really start flowing together to make for a very fast-paced character indeed. He even makes the game itself better, as it improves the pacing of the game in and of itself. It really adds a dynamic to the stages of the 3DS version with his combos and all that, which is something you wouldn't normally get from any other character. Receiving our silver medals though is a character that Crash the Skylanders will be proud of, and that's Bash. The character is incredible in the 3DS. You can string attacks together with this guy to make him so fast-paced and powerful. It's beyond fun to use. I've never seen a character more fast-paced, more powerful, and more combo-heavy than this guy before. He is just so much fun and so effective and powerful because of those combos you can easily string together, which I was previously talking about. It makes the game itself feel much more fast-paced once again, and he's got to be one of the greatest speedrunners of the entire cast for the 3DS version, as I needed to speedrun through the entirety of Swap Force 3DS after a previous save got corrupted and I had to play up to that point in the game quickly, so Bash was my go-to choice. It also goes without saying that he looks tough. He's a character you want to pick up and play because you know you'll have an absolute blast playing as him. His gameplay certainly lives up to that awesome design of his. But my number 1 will be a character that will always be my favourite no matter which version of the games you're playing, and that's going to be Igniter. Such an unpredictable twist for the best list right here, I know. But congratulations if you saw this video's greatest curveball coming. Like I said, it certainly was an unpredictable twist, but enough of repeating myself. After all repetition does is create an effect, the effect being to put emphasis on everything you are repeating. I'm going to move on without further ado, because what makes this guy so awesome is the fact that he's so fast, so powerful, so much fun, and he's got an incredibly awesome personality and animations to go alongside it as cherry on top of the cake. Above all, his design is also extremely awesome, and his moves are just so powerful. The perfect trio of factors I look for in good Skylanders, especially when you couple that with the fast pace of the character. This definitely motivates me to place Igniter onto a portal. After all, how could I not find myself wanting to play as an enchanted suit of armor, which is literally on fire. Wouldn't want to be an enemy fighting this guy, that's for sure. So I cannot think of a Skylander more worthy of #1 on this list than Igniter himself. Saying they definitely put him in for 3DS starter pack for Skylanders Sparks Adventure with good reason. They got to kick you off with a badass character, am I right? Otherwise, why would you pick up other characters if you think they're all going to be lame? Yeah, Igniter kind of proves that Skylanders can be anything but lame. With that being said and done, this video is coming to an end, and I want to thank you all so much for watching. By merely clicking on this video, you've shown support and helped it garner recognition so it can reach many other viewers here on YouTube. I'd love to see you take the extra step and leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. Also be sure to comment below and push that subscribe button whilst you're down there. By clicking elsewhere on screen, you can either check out a video that's specifically picked out for you, or you can check out the rest of the playlist for a series you just watched. Before ending off, I'd like to thank all of my Blazing Knights and Scorching Dragons whose support help make these videos possible. I'll be seeing you in the next video, and until that moment arises, peace!